Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a Monday morning filled with tons of sports news, not only in the NBA. The Lakers, the Bucks collect big wins. The NBA released the second half of its schedule. So I'm going to break down my top 5 most anticipated games, even some sources about the All-Star game. Different participants in that All-Star game. I'm going to react to that. And the Cowboys, of course, making the news for saying it's laughable to trade for Russell Wilson. That's coming up. So I cannot wait to touch on that. But first, stick with the NBA. I love that the NBA is back on Sundays. A lot of the marquee games playing on Sundays, and we had a great one yesterday. The Milwaukee Bucks and the Los Angeles Clippers, two teams at the top of their conferences, potential finals preview matchup. Now, again, I don't believe that is the case, but this is really interesting. So the Milwaukee Bucks, we've thrown out the term fragile and mentally weak in sports. We throw that term out all the time. And how are teams, how are players perceived psychologically? Are they going to rise to the moment or are they going to fall? Right? That's always the biggest question mark when we're evaluating teams is how mentally tough are you? And we don't throw out the term fragile very often. But the team that we've always had the most questions about in the NBA, especially when we reach the postseason, are the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks have always had the most questions surrounding them because we've heaped so much praise onto them. And as a consequence, we've had so many high expectations for this team over the past 3 years. You look at the Milwaukee Bucks the last 2 years, they finished with the best record in the NBA in 2 straight seasons. Not only the Eastern Conference, in the NBA, they collected the number 1 seed. We saw them flame out 2 years ago. They lost 4 straight games to the Toronto Raptors in the Eastern Conference Finals after winning the first 2. And then last year, of course, they got eviscerated by the Miami Heat in 5 games. Now, I know Giannis ended up tweaking his ankle really badly, so he really couldn't go the remainder of that series. But they had already trailed 3 games to nothing prior to his injury. So now comes the moment when we start to look back and say, okay, what teams do we associate with fragile, with mentally weak? And unfortunately, the Milwaukee Bucks have always kind of fit that card. They fit that stereotype the last few seasons. And even though it was just the regular season, I was extremely concerned about the Milwaukee Bucks entering this year psychologically, how they would be able to respond and react to the way that they crumbled at the end of last season. That was my biggest question mark. And so you look at this Milwaukee Bucks teams and you're saying to yourself, well, right now, they're actually in a great spot because they're only 3rd in the Eastern Conference. They're only half a game back of the 2 seed. They're only 1 game back of the Philadelphia 76ers for the number 1 overall seed in the Eastern Conference. So right now, they're kind of keeping on pace with where we might expect them to be. But they really lacked this year any marquee wins, any marquee victories. That was what was missing from the Milwaukee Bucks this year. They lost in all their prominent games. They lost to the Celtics. They lost to the Jazz twice. They lost to Phoenix. And they lost to the Lakers along with the Brooklyn Nets. They hadn't collected a marquee win all season. So this was the first time when they matched up against a powerhouse, against a team that many believe to be a top 2, worst case top 3 team in the Western Conference, and they collected the win. And it was important, the fashion in which they won this basketball game. Not just the fact that they won, the fact that they were able to overcome a late deficit, the fact that they got Drew Holiday back, which was why this was so important, was not because Drew Holiday necessarily had eye-popping statistical numbers, because he didn't. 2 points, 3 assists, 2 turnovers in 18 minutes, but you could see his mere presence providing that emotional lift and jump that this team needed, that boost that they'd been lacking, because the Milwaukee Bucks had lost 5 straight games. Now entering this game, they had won 4 straight games, now make it 5. And again, Jrue Holiday's presence just opened up the lane. Giannis was able to take advantage of it, drive it all the way down to the rim. He had 36 points, 14 rebounds, 5 assists, but more importantly, 4 blocks, and he made 2 3-pointers. Now, the block that he had on Ivica Zubac, boy, that kid has to take a seat, because Giannis met him at the rim with a full head of steam and just swatted that away. That was a filthy denial by Giannis. And then 2 out of 7 from the 3-point line. And to me, I don't really care about the volume of 3-point shots. I like the aggressive mentality. I like the lack of trepidation at the 3-point line. I like that he was willing to work on the game, on the part of his game that needs the most improvement, which is shooting that 3-point shot. And so if he's going to give you 2 of 7 on a nightly basis from the 3-point line, honestly, I'll take it, because at least it forces the defense to have to respect you a little bit, and they can't just clog the lane the entire night. So that was really, really important. And he outscored the Clippers 17-10 by himself over the final 8 minutes and 30 seconds in the fourth quarter. So that's what you need to know. That's what told the story. And so for the first time in over 3 weeks, because Jrue Holiday had been missing so much time, this was really one of the first times, again, in 3 weeks that this Milwaukee Bucks team were healthy, were full, and they were able to take advantage of it. And now when you match up this team, this was a good measuring stick, because their full healthy roster against the full healthy roster of the Clippers, and they prevailed. And this was a huge psychological boost and psychological lift for a team that needed it. And again, I don't want to focus on the lack of scoring or the stagnant offense from the Clippers down the stretch, because this is not about the Clippers right now. Today is about the Milwaukee Bucks and them finally showing that they're proving some of their mettle, proving that they have some fight, an ability to overcome a deficit late in the game, and Giannis being able to help propel them to a victory. And that was something that we just didn't see yet. And again, I'm not saying it's going to necessarily translate into the postseason, but for a regular season game, and I don't like to dwell on regular season games too much, but this was a crucial psychological boost for a Milwaukee Bucks team that, quite frankly, were reeling prior to a week and a half ago. So now they've won 5 straight games. They're starting to find their rhythm, starting to click again on offense, and they collected a huge, huge win over a Western Conference foe. Now, speaking of some of the top teams in the Western Conference, the Lakers beat the living crap out of the Golden State Warriors yesterday. I mean, this game was over from the moment it tipped off. And this was kind of expected, given the fashion in which the Lakers blew that 14-point lead to the Warriors in their first meeting at Staples Center. So this was kind of avenging that loss. And not to mention Dennis Schroeder, they got him back. He had missed the previous 5 or 6 games, and this was his second game back due to the contact tracing and COVID protocols. And the Lakers beat the Portland Trailblazers on Friday, and then they beat the Warriors, obviously, last night. And this is the biggest flaw in sports, is evaluating teams when they're missing some of their key pieces and players. This is the biggest flaw in sports, because we always try to evaluate how this team's going to perform from a binary perspective. Yes, they're playing better. No, they're not playing better. And this is the biggest misconception, because what we fail to recognize is the addition of emotional lifts. Emotional lifts can't be understated. In life, if you're without your second or your third best asset, regardless of your industry, the overall value of that entity is going to depreciate. It's going to be devalued, right? And even what happens that we don't talk about is the value of your best asset when you're missing your second and third best assets. Your number one asset also devalues and depreciates. So what ends up happening is you're losing more than just your second and your third best piece at your disposal. You're also not getting 100% of your best piece. If you're a doctor and you're about to operate on someone and you're without your second or third best doctor colleague in the operational room with you, that's fewer eyeballs on the operation. That's less consulting. That's less guidance. So not only do you miss their advice, but your attitude as the number one overall doctor in the operational room probably diminishes a little bit, because not that your confidence is shaken, because it may not shake, and hopefully it isn't, but it starts to recoil a little bit because there are less people to consult while you're in the operational room. So now all the doctors, all the nurses that are in this room with you, their value depreciates because you haven't inspired them to overall have this more positive energy and this positive outlook and flow while you're operating. So the entire value goes down. And now once one of those doctors re-enters the room, tranquility is restored. And that's the same thing that happened with the Lakers. That's what we were failing to factor in and acknowledge when we were looking at this Lakers team. It was like, well, listen, they're missing Anthony Davis, they're Dennis Schroeder. So we're expecting that all the other pieces on the team, including LeBron, were going to play at the exact same level that they were playing before. And in LeBron's case, we even expected that his level of play would elevate, when in reality, it was the exact antithesis of that. What happened was, not only were the Lakers missing Anthony Davis, not only were they missing Dennis Schroeder, but they weren't getting 100% of LeBron. Maybe they were getting 90% of LeBron. So when you're missing two of your key guys, the impact goes beyond just directly what the numbers say, because the rest of the supporting cast isn't playing the same. And the minute you add one of those two pieces back into the mix, you see what happens. The confidence is regained. The energy and the desire to win is restored. The players have a greater incentive to play better because they feel like they've got this extra assurance and sense of security that there are other guys that are going to rally around one another. And that's the impact that a second or a third guy can have on the number one player. So again, we always talk about, well, how is this going to impact the role players? Oh, the role players are going to have to step up. But how does this impact the number one option? How does your best asset do when he or she is missing their second and third best assets? Well, the overall entity depreciates. And so for the Lakers, this was a huge addition to get Dennis Schroeder back, because you saw the toll it was taking on LeBron, and he wasn't making excuses, but you could see that he was a little bit more lethargic and apathetic when it came to some of these regular season games. Against Utah, they got blown out, which is not surprising. And what's interesting is actually Steph pointed out how Draymond Green, who tweaked his ankle and missed the second half of the game, although the game again was already a 30-point game when he got injured, made a shrewd point, which is that teams still remember the stretch of dominance that the Warriors displayed over the last 5-6 seasons. Now, last year was obviously the aberration. Clay went down, Steph was out, so they weren't good. But prior to that, they were just coming off a finals run of like 4 finals in 5 years. So, or actually 5 finals in 6 years, something crazy like that. And so teams still remember getting demolished, getting demoralized, humiliated, and embarrassed by this Warriors team, that they just want to beat them as badly as they can while they have them down, kick them while they're down. And while I think that is a legitimate and fair point when it comes to most teams, the Lakers, they don't really feature many guys who were on teams. Like the Lakers, their roster wasn't a part of the purple and gold when the Warriors were blowing through the league. A lot of these guys played for different teams. Now, maybe on these different teams, they got destroyed by the Warriors. But while a member of the purple and gold, that never happened. So interesting to think about. But again, it just shows you the type of impact that the return of a player not just has on the team, but has on your best asset, and how that impact can trickle down to the rest of the squad. Morning Joe right here, J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. So the NBA released the second half schedule of the NBA season, and there are a lot of marquee games, and so I'm going to preview my top 5 most anticipated NBA games in the second half of the season. I'll also throw in a couple honorary mentions as well. So at number 5, and this is going to blow your mind that I am throwing this game in there. That's right. The New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets on March 15th. I know what you're thinking. Jonah, is this really a highly anticipated game? Yes, it is. The New York Knicks, ladies and gentlemen, the New York Knicks, you look up at the standings, they're the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. They're 18-17. The first meeting between these two teams was a single digits loss, a 116-109 loss. The New York Knicks hadn't found their rhythm yet. Tom Thibodeau's doing a great job. RJ Barrett's playing well. Julius Randle, obviously an all-star for the first time this season. They acquired Derrick Rose a couple weeks ago, and this team is rolling. And it's a battle of New York. We talked about the battle of LA. The battle of New York is real. And all the glamour town is no longer Midtown Manhattan. The glamour town is Brooklyn, New York. And this is not as lopsided of a matchup as we expected it to be. The Knicks are the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. They've got to start garnering some more respect and recognition. It's hard to believe that they are, but they are. And so I cannot wait to see this matchup. And it's a top 4 matchup in the Eastern Conference. The Brooklyn Nets are the 2 seed. So that is the first most anticipated game of the second half of the NBA season for me. At number 4, the Brooklyn Nets at the Utah Jazz. Listen, the Brooklyn Nets are the most intriguing team in basketball, but the most surprising team in basketball is the Utah Jazz. Now, we expect them to be good. They always are in the mix every single season, but if you thought that the Utah Jazz were going to be blowing away with the league's best record, you'd be lying to yourself. This team has been a revelation. They're 27-7 right now. Head and shoulders the best record, not only in the Western Conference, but in the Eastern Conference as well. And this is the game that could perhaps turn me and us as fans into believers. We need some more convincing from the Utah Jazz. Now, we might not get it till the postseason, but as far as regular season games go, this is a great measuring stick. Both of these teams are some of the best offensive teams in the league. Brooklyn's number 1 in points per game. Utah Jazz are 3 in points per game. The Brooklyn Nets are 2nd in three-point percentage. The Jazz are 4th in three-point percentage. And the Jazz have 2 10-plus game winning streaks in the NBA. They've had the longest game winning streaks in the NBA this season. Twice they've done it. So powerhouse from the West, best record in the NBA, taking on the favorite to come out of the Eastern Conference. Again, the first true measuring stick, I think, to turn us into believers if you're the Utah Jazz, and I cannot wait to see that one. At number 3, again, the Brooklyn Nets and the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm sorry to keep throwing the Brooklyn Nets in there, but are they not the most entertaining team? They really are. James Harden, Kyrie, KD, and now you travel to Milwaukee this time, just the second meeting. And really, this is going to be the last legitimate meeting between these two teams because they play 2 days following this matchup. But the first matchup was a 2-point win. They eked out a 2-point win. Brooklyn did 125-123. Both of them were fully healthy. James Harden was in a Nets uniform for just the second time all season. And now, not only is this intriguing for me because I predicted this to be the Eastern Conference Finals preview, but again, this is the last real chance to make a statement for me between these two teams heading into the postseason. Because again, they play 2 days later, but my gut sense is that that second game isn't going to be nearly as competitive, isn't going to be nearly as anticipated, because I think maybe Kyrie and his shoulder won't play. KD will rest his hamstring. There will be some key guy missing from that second matchup, and I don't think that they're going to want to reveal all their cards right now in that second matchup in that weekend. But this matchup on the 2nd of May is going to be a great one. And again, the first matchup was so thrilling and entertaining all the way down to the wire. Cannot wait for what round 2 has in store for us. Speaking of round 2, the Lakers and the Clippers, April 4th. This is just the second meeting between these two teams since ring night, literally since opening night in the NBA when the Lakers faced the Clippers. And the Lakers were still reveling in their championship season. They were collecting and receiving their rings. So I didn't put much stock into that opening night victory for the Clippers. Now, I was impressed by the Clippers in that outing, and they did what they needed to do, and I expected them to win that game. But this is really where both of these two teams would like to make a statement. And again, they play a third time towards the end of the season, but I'm not going to put much or add much credence to that win. This is the matchup that we wanted to see, the Lakers and the Clippers. And again, if it was not for the Brooklyn Nets trading for James Harden, we might be talking about this as the matchup that everyone wanted to see right now. And so both of these teams, not only is it a battle of LA, but it'll be a fun matchup. Star power, AD, and now Dennis Schroeder is fully acclimated, fully incorporated into this team, immersed fully. The Clippers obviously have their core established. So it's always a fun one at Staples Center. And then my number one anticipated game of the second half of the season, and arguably this could be the most anticipated game of the regular season this year, the Lakers at the Brooklyn Nets. The first round, yes, this is a rematch, but the first go round really just lacked the flair and pizzazz that we were expecting it. All the buzz surrounding it. KD wasn't playing for the Brooklyn Nets. AD and Schroeder weren't playing for the Lakers. So this wasn't really a true test, in my opinion, for both of these teams. I don't think that there was a lot you could glean, at least from the Lakers' perspective. The Brooklyn Nets, they showed, hey, James Harden and Kyrie Irving were in the midst of an 8-game winning streak. They showed that they could win together and still be potent offensively. And the Nets certainly displayed how dangerous they are as a collective group. But this is going to be the ultimate dichotomy because, again, you've got the old star in LeBron with the younger star, Anthony Davis, against former teammates, former adversaries, and guys that LeBron has knocked off the pedestal along the way with KD, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving, all three hating guts. And the Nets, number one offense in the league, the Lakers, number one defense in the league. And now they'd both be full and healthy, which is what we wanted the first go round, but we were deprived of that elite matchup. So that's the one that I'm expecting to be the most anticipated. Again, it's my finals preview. That's what I predicted entering this year. So I'm looking forward to that one. And then some honorary mentions, just to throw it out there. Now, technically, this doesn't count. The Utah Jazz at the Philadelphia 76ers is taking place literally Wednesday, March 3rd. Technically, it's still part of the first half slate of games. But for me, again, this is a matchup of two of the best teams as far as record-wise is concerned in the Western Conference, in the Eastern Conference. And this is one of the few matchups that actually features a rivalry at the center position. I feel like we never have anymore that center matchup, that where you've got Joel Embiid and now Rudy Gobert going to get after it. Nikola Jokic is the only other guy. DeMarcus Cousins, unfortunately, has departed from this conversation. Rudy Gobert and Joel Embiid, there's bad blood between the two of them. And it's just kind of refreshing to get a center rivalry because normally you don't see it. It's center to point guard. We saw Joel Embiid and Russell Westbrook. You see guards matching up against one another. So this is going to be a fun one. Then I also got the Brooklyn Nets at the Philadelphia 76ers. More so for the Philadelphia 76ers, because, again, I think that it's an opportunity for them to try and make a statement heading into the postseason. Both of these teams split their first two meetings, so this is kind of the winner-take-all third meeting and final meeting before the postseason. And I think that both of these teams will go all out. And Joel Embiid right now is the leading candidate for league MVP. The Nets are obviously rolling, and it's only a couple weeks away. It's one of the first games after the All-Star break, so KD is expected to play. So that should be a fun one, a potential Eastern Conference Final preview. And then my final honorary mention in my most anticipated NBA games of the second half of the season, the Denver Nuggets at the LA Clippers on Saturday, May 1st. This is the final meeting between these two teams in the regular season before potentially meeting in the postseason. And again, why is this so important? Well, we know what the Denver Nuggets did to the LA Clippers in the bubble last year. They completed the comeback. They were trailing 3-1. They won 3 straight, won in Game 7. They prevented the world from seeing that Lakers-Clippers clash in the Western Conference Finals for a chance to go to the finals, to advance to the finals. Everyone was expecting that, and we were deprived of that matchup. And it's not that it was necessarily a bad deprivation, but the reality was people weren't exactly as juiced to see Denver and the Lakers. But to the Nuggets' credit, they said the hell with what the narrative should be. They showed up the Clippers. And so I think that the Clippers don't necessarily get up for too many big regular season games. Obviously, the Lakers they get up for, the Brooklyn Nets they got up for, the Milwaukee Bucks they get up for. The Denver Nuggets is kind of a brewing and percolating rivalry, and I think that they've got a little bit more respect for the Nuggets given that they eliminated them in the postseason last year. So that's going to be a fun one. That should be a fun one. So those are my games that I'm previewing that I'm most anticipated for in the second half of the season. So now, transitioning to All-Star Weekend, some sources came out about 3 of the key guys that will be highlighting the 2021 NBA All-Star Dunk Contest. Yes, yesterday they came out. Anthony Salmons with the Portland Trail Blazers, Cassius Stanley with the Indiana Pacers, and Obi Toppin with the New York Knicks. Now, here's the recent trend in the NBA when it comes to the NBA All-Star Dunk Contest. The recent trend is the NBA is starting to highlight more of the younger players. That's what we've started to see. And obviously the game will take place for the first time in an unprecedented manner during halftime of the All-Star game because they're trying to limit the number of days that all these players are in the same city and in the same environment. So I understand that. Now, for some backdrop, Obi Toppin, of course, the number 8 overall pick drafted by the Knicks this past season. He's playing sparingly, though. Just like 12 minutes a game, drafted out of Dayton, really isn't playing that many minutes, but was a high flyer, was a high dunker at Dayton. Cassius Stanley isn't even on the Indiana Pacers roster right now. He's on the Fort Wayne Mad Ants, the G League team for the Indiana Pacers. So he's not even on the Indiana Pacers roster. Now, we know that he's a high dunker. We saw the type of bounce that he displayed at Duke. We haven't seen that in the NBA. And Anthony Simons, third-year player for the Portland Trail Blazers. To his credit, he is having a career high in points per game, 8.5 points per game. He's 6'4". He's athletic with a 6'7" wingspan. And I have seen some of his highlights dunking because I was not sure when his name was thrown into this mix, can this guy fly? And he shows that he's got a lot of bounce. But for the most part, these are really not marquee guys. And one of the aspects that has made the All-Star Dunk Contest so riveting, so captivating, and really the biggest draw, arguably for many years during All-Star Weekend, was that not only did it feature the more athletic players in the NBA, but it featured the athletic and prominent players in the NBA. You saw Vince Carter, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant participate in the dunk contest. They even won the dunk contest In more recent years, we saw John Wall, Zach LaVine, Donovan Mitchell, Aaron Gordon participate in the dunk contest. And even if you look at last year, Derrick Jones Jr., while he wasn't a star, most of the time, the dunk contest features, maybe it's not always stars, but it could be role players that contribute. And again, Derrick Jones Jr. for the Miami Heat, he did play valuable stretches of minutes in the finals for the Heat last year. Hamidou Diallo, who won the dunk contest in 2019. No, he's not a star. He's a role player with OKC, but he's starting to come into his own. We've seen these guys make appearances. But this year feels like the first year where we're missing any marquee guys. And to be honest, I was a little bit underwhelmed when this list was revealed. Not because none of these guys are athletic, not because they can't display some hops, but normally there's a tremendous amount of buzz and juice around the dunk contest. And part of what helps attribute, what can be attributed to that is the buildup for it, is the hype surrounding it. And when I look at Anthony Simons and I look at Cassius Stanley and I look at Obi Toppin, sure, some of these guys were great college dunkers, but it's missing that flair. It's missing that fire. And the reason why do I, Jonah Malkin, want to sit down and cuff my arms to the chair to watch this? And right now, sure, I'll watch it because I'm an NBA fan, and I do think that Anthony Simons has some sneaky hops. But if you're telling me that those are the three headliners, I'm not wowed by it. Now, if you tell me that Zion Williamson is entering the dunk contest, which he actually hinted at potentially doing, okay, now I'm glued to the chair. Now I'm not even getting up to pee during a commercial break. I'm sitting through this entire thing. But I'm missing some of that excitement. Now, I think part of it is that the best players are realizing that competing in some of these skills challenges, and less so the three-point shooting, the three-point shot contest and the skills challenge, but more so the dunking, they're realizing that they want to preserve themselves and that they don't want to overexhaust themselves for some meaningless and trivial all-star game trophy. Now, personally, I think that what the NBA needs to do, I would implore the NBA perhaps to start doling out greater incentives to some of these NBA players to rejoin and re-enter the dunk contest, because when it was at its peak interest and peak popularity level, it was when it was featuring the best guys, the most prominent stars in the league, and we're just missing that right now, and that's a real shame. That's really disappointing. Again, I'm still going to watch it, and again, Cassius Stanley has had tremendous highlights, but he's not even in the NBA. He's playing for the G League team with the Pacers. Like, you couldn't find anyone else that could participate? Maybe throw Derrick Jones Jr. back in because he's the reigning champion. I don't know if he just declined the option. And again, a lot of these players just kind of recuse themselves from the situation, from being considered at all. But it's just a little bit underwhelming to hear. But again, you throw in Zion Williamson, okay, now I'm not going anywhere. I'm watching the entire thing. So, Morning Joe right here, J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube, Mondays and Wednesday mornings, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. So this was interesting, transitioning to the NFL. An NFL insider reported yesterday that the Dallas Cowboys would find it laughable to trade for Russell Wilson. That's pretty funny. And NFL insider Jane Slater reported that the idea of the Cowboys trading for Wilson is extremely unlikely. They're focused on signing Dak. Now, we know that as of last week, amid these trade rumors, that there were 4 teams that appeared that were revealed by Russell Wilson as far as destinations he would be willing to be traded to. Obviously, the Cowboys were one, but the Bears, the Saints, And the fourth team was the Las Vegas Raiders. Of course, big markets helps when you have a wife who's a huge celebrity. So we understand why those big markets were a draw. Now, for posterity's sake, for the Cowboys to even consider doing this, they'd have to give up at least 3 first-round draft picks or get Dak Prescott to not only sign the franchise tag, but then sign him to a longer deal so that way they could make the salaries match up. And of course, of the 4 teams, the only team to actually come out and say anything publicly was the Dallas Cowboys. Now, if we take this report at face value and we say that this is a legitimate report, that this option is really on the table. If you're the Dallas Cowboys, should you trade for Russell Wilson? Absolutely yes. A resounding yes. And they'd be nuts if they're not at least considering a trade. In fact, what would be laughable is if they don't consider this trade. It's laughable that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. So I don't think we've been appreciating Russell Wilson for the past couple of years, because if the Dallas Cowboys legitimately refuse to engage in a talk, again, this doesn't mean they're actually going to trade for him, but if they're not going to consider it, then that's epitomizing the ineptitude and the imprudence shown by Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones, because there's no way in hell in your sane mind that you would not consider. Again, doesn't mean you have to act on it. Consider the trade is a preposterous decision not to do it at all. You're looking at a guy in Russell Wilson, and I don't want to hear, oh, well, Dak Prescott is better than Russell Wilson because the Cowboys squeaked by the Seattle Seahawks in a playoff wildcard game 3 years ago, 24-22. Ezekiel Elliott rushed for 137 yards in that game. Russell Wilson had more passing yards, had a better QBR than Dak Prescott in that game. I don't want to hear that it was because of Dak Prescott's heroics, even though he completed some good throws and he picked up some clutch first downs with his legs. I don't want to hear that it was Dak Prescott beat Russell Wilson in the playoffs. No, the Cowboys riding the legs and the back of Ezekiel Elliott beat a depleted Seattle Seahawks team that didn't have any weapons. Think about what Russell Wilson has been accomplishing here. He's been to 2 Super Bowls. He's won a Super Bowl. He's in the MVP conversation every single season. He's made the playoffs in 8 out of his 9 seasons as a starter. He's thrown for over 4,000 yards in 4 seasons this year. And he's been doing this with Tyler Lockett, who's a 3rd-round draft pick, Doug Baldwin, who's retired but was an undrafted player, and no run game. Apologies to Chris Carson. I'm sorry. They're never healthy, and I know he had Marshawn Lynch at one point in his career, but he's had no run game throughout the prime of his career. Again, right when he entered the league, he had Marshawn Lynch, but the last 4 or 5 seasons, he hasn't had any run game. So I don't want to hear that Russell Wilson isn't talented enough for the Dallas Cowboys, because what Russell Wilson does is he's able to elevate the level of play of his teammates akin to Tom Brady. I'm not saying they're the same, but that trait is what Russell Wilson possesses, similar to Tom Brady, is their ability to elevate the confidence and the overall impact of the players around them. And so not only would you be pairing Russell Wilson with an Amari Cooper, with a Michael Gallup, with a CeeDee Lamb, with a run game. Imagine what Russell Wilson would do with those weapons at his disposal. Not to mention he's extremely marketable, would flourish in Dallas. Marketing perspective, he's absolutely a dream piece to add there. And it's no knock on Dak Prescott, but health is an important factor here. It really is. And I'm hoping for a healthy and a full, speedy recovery for Dak Prescott. I sincerely hope that ankle can recover, because he is the consummate professional. He's beloved in Dallas. The fans, the city, the organization truly does love Dak Prescott. And I'm sure that they deep down really want to retain him. But Russell Wilson, knock on wood, I'm knocking on wood for him, has displayed no history of injuries. And at the quarterback position, at the one position where when you're on offense, they touch the ball on every single snap, I need to be sure that the guy that's at the helm is available. The best ability is availability. And while I believe that Dak Prescott will recover well and he'll continue to be a good quarterback, he's not at the same level as Russell Wilson. So Jerry Jones, you're 78. You're wanting to see the Dallas Cowboys not obviously you want to see them win one more Super Bowl, but at least compete for a Super Bowl one more time while you're still alive and the proud owner of the Dallas Cowboys. This is something that you at least need to consider. Again, the Seattle Seahawks, I wouldn't think about this trade at all. I wouldn't engage in this trade at all. But if you're Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, and the Cowboys, it's laughable that you think it's laughable to trade for this guy. So, because again, I'm not saying that the Seattle Seahawks would do this because they wouldn't, or if they really shouldn't, but you have to evaluate all of your options and at least consider all of your options. And if you're not doing that, you're doing a disservice to your franchise, to your organization, and quite frankly, to your teammates. Now, again, I know from a sentimental standpoint, Dak Prescott should be a Dallas Cowboy. I hope he remains a Dallas Cowboy. But if you're not entertaining this trade, you're doing a great disservice to your team. This was a recent story with Josh Gordon. It was reported just yesterday that he has apparently rejoined the Zappers, the fan-controlled football league owned by Bob Menery. And Josh Gordon, of course, would be joining up with former NFL quarterback Johnny Manziel on the same team. They lived together in LA for about a year or so. And this is just one of the more sobering sports topics because so much potential was wasted here. Of course, we know Josh Gordon was a former All-Pro wide receiver. And Josh Gordon, Johnny Manziel, of course, were teammates in Cleveland, and this is just kind of a 7-on-7 fan-controlled league. But this is the story of what could have been. What could have been with all this potential if it was maximized. And I understand that he's been a troubled wide receiver. He's been battling substance abuse issues and an opioid addiction for years throughout his entire life. And he hasn't completed a full season since 2013. And in that 2013 season, again, I'll break down some of the stats that he had, but it's just such a shame because he was obviously been repeatedly suspended indefinitely multiple times. And just a month ago, he was a member of the Seattle Seahawks and then was let go because he failed to be reinstated. He failed some type of, he had a conditional reinstatement offer. The NFL rescinded that. This was the seventh suspension since 2013 for Josh Gordon, the fifth for substance abuse issues. And this is a guy who was drafted in the second round out of Utah and Baylor, of course. And he's just got so much innate skill and innate talent that's unteachable. He's 6'3", 225, ran a 40-yard dash in 4.5 seconds. He possesses that raw talent that you rarely see nowadays with athletes. And in his second year in the NFL in 2013, he led the league in receiving yards with like 1,647 receiving yards, which was head and shoulders above the next closest guy in Antonio Brown, who had like 1,499 receiving yards. So in his second season in the NFL, Josh Gordon was an all-pro wide receiver, led the league in receiving yards. And it's just really sad and unfortunate to see a guy whose talents are just withered away in a fan-controlled league, to put it candidly. And what makes it more unbearable and what makes it just more saddening is the fact that he has such rare ability. And in the NFL, you rarely get second, third, fourth, fifth chances at a return. You rarely see that. Maybe you get a second chance, maybe you get a third chance if you're lucky. And he's been blessed with so much talent that teams find value in him that they're willing to give him these second, third, fourth, fifth chances and opportunities to right the wrongs and be a valuable asset, because not only has he missed out on an opportunity to provide generational wealth for himself and his family rather, but again, you just rarely see athletes get an opportunity in sports to get a second and third chance. And this guy's had 5 or 6 chances. And while I definitely don't want to downplay the severity of addiction and substance abuse issues, because it's real and it's a grave illness, and for him it's a chronic illness as well. And I have no idea what it's like. And I know he grew up in a very troubling environment, being exposed to a lot of these things growing up. And it's a shame, because here you have someone who appeared to have gone out and been removed from this environment, from this situation, and there are still these persisting issues. And it's just a shame, because, again, this is someone that had displayed so much talent, so much promise. And again, it's a very serious issue. I have no idea what it's like, what the type of trauma he's dealing with on a day-to-day basis. But I certainly hope that he recovers. But this is just a reminder, a sober reminder of what could have been and who we were missing. And that's the shame in all of this. So just kind of heartbreaking. Again, I know he's been battling this his entire life. I'm glad to see he's at least playing football, a sport that he loves, but a shame nonetheless. Okay, so now it's finally my favorite moment. And that's fun, getting a call right in the middle of the show. You normally don't get that too often. Okay, Malkin's Moments. And again, I'm starting to integrate the added user-friendly, interactive experience in my Malkin's Moments. I got a lot of great Malkin's Moments for you today. So first, the Kansas men's basketball team knocked off Baylor 71-58 yesterday behind 20 points from David McCormack. And this is significant because you hand Baylor their first loss of the season. Now Gonzaga is the only remaining undefeated team in college basketball in the NCAA. So huge win for the Jayhawks and Bill Self's program. Then, of course, we know about that the tragic car accident involving Tiger Woods, and in a great and just a beautiful display of remorse and not remorse rather, but affection for Tiger Woods. You saw Rory McIlroy, Justin Thomas, Tony Finau, others wearing the iconic Sunday look for Tiger Woods: red sport shirt, black pants, and they wore that on the final day of the WGC Workday Championship in honor of Tiger Woods. Of course, again, his iconic outfit that he wears. And actually, at the entire Puerto Rico Open, the entire maintenance staff donned that signature outfit. And of course, Tiger Woods has worn a red shirt and black pants on just numerous Sunday, final days of tournaments. And he's had plenty of memorable moments en route to winning 15 majors, and that is one of those reasons why. All right, second to final Malkin's moments, because my final Malkin's moment is the one you're going to want to stick around for. That's the interactive experience one. But Buddy Hield made history in the NBA. The Kings guard became the fastest player to reach 1,000 points, or 1,000 3-point shots, rather. Not 1,000 points, 1,000 3-point shots in just 350 games. A tremendous milestone for this guy. Just incredible. Incredible to see. So good for Buddy Hield. He tweaked his ankle last night. Unfortunately, the Kings blew a late game last night, but it is what it is. Okay, so now give me a moment. I'm going to show you the next highlight. So the Baltimore Orioles, Trey Mancini, who missed the entire 2020 season battling stage 3 of colon cancer, returned into preseason action for the Baltimore Orioles yesterday. He hit a single and got a standing ovation from not only the dugout, but the fans that were there. Just a beautiful moment. This is a guy that's produced 35 home runs, 97 RBIs. It was really primed for a big season. He produced these numbers in 2019, and then, of course, 5 games into the 2020 season, he unfortunately had to undergo surgery because of stage 3 colon cancer. And now the fact that he was back and had this beautiful moment is just beautiful. This is why we like sports. So I want to show you the clip right now on ESPN. You can find it anywhere. Hopefully I can play this loud enough for you. So just a beautiful moment right there. Again, the angle that they decided to give for the base hit wasn't that beautiful, but the moment in and of itself was really special. And again, I love that the umpire and the pitcher stepped off the mound. The umpire was cleaning the home plate a little bit longer to prolong the standing ovation for Trey Mancini. So beautiful moment in sports. All right, that's all the time that I got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me on a Monday morning. You've been watching Morning Joe right here, J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin, wishing every one of you a lovely rest of your morning.